All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today. We have one of the more interesting, or the topic that has driven a lot of interest and questions. Emails and people asking, and that is Teams again. So we'll be talking about Teams. We've done a couple of different sessions on Teams. In this session, we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to high level talk about things like communication and managing things like projects. We'll do that from a high level, but we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the workflow and automation capabilities, and we'll talk about that a little bit. It can get a little wonky, especially with Derek and I here, but it's very interesting stuff, and frequently it's not something that people think a lot about, is that Teams is actually a very powerful workflow or automation tool. There's a lot of capabilities there, and Derek will go through that at a high level. And I think we actually even have it's not a live demo, but it's an actual demo of a workflow that he's done recently to talk to. So with that, I don't know, Derek, if you want to share your screen.
Yep, I just need some access.
Oops, sorry about that. We can go ahead and do that. There you go. You should be good to go.
That's the right one. All right. Should all be here now?
Yep, you see the screen.
Awesome. All right, so Microsoft Teams, SharePoints, and Powerapps. Just like what Keith said, it's just going to be a top-down look at some of these systems. Since we've kind of gone over Teams a little bit before, it's a great communication tool. It allows you to not only do instant messaging with so many other people, but it also allows you to kind of have those nice voice meetings, as well as doing share screen, kind of like what we're doing right now.
I think one of the other things about that's important to note is that if you're in an organization that's using Skype for Business, Skype for Business is going away this week, never to be seen again. So, that's something to think about. And Teams obviously is taking its place, but when we talk about those communications and the collaboration, Skype for Business app is definitely leaving the planet right now. So something to consider.
But at least it's being replaced with a really powerful tool. So
right.
I'll definitely take this over Skype.
Yep. No, as a person who's used that before too, Teams is a much more powerful tool.
And then going on to some of the management perspective, it lets you coordinate with your team, know where people are at. It's great for knowing where projects are in the pipeline, not only just with communication, but also you can set up smaller groups to really hone in on whatever projects you're working on, or if you're working in specific areas. Then one of the things that we're kind of looking at getting into here is we can actually integrate Teams from that management perspective to actually go into requesting vacation and scheduling people as well. This is one of the applications I've made where it's actually living in our Teams environment, where anyone can go into there to request vacation or to know who else is out of office, to kind of get that idea of what's happening there.
It's being able to do that is very handy, especially like when you're managing projects and you're working in a matrixed environment. Being able to have a tool to help you track those vacation days or who's off and those types of things is super handy. Maybe before we dive into that a little bit, Derek, one of the things that we should maybe talk about is kind of from a larger perspective, a little bit of structure. So, and by that I mean that when we think about Teams, we kind of think about that as an app, and that's the way it's presented to the end user community. But really, Teams ends up being a wrapper that's actually wrapped around a foundational SharePoint implementation. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit and just talk about the underlying SharePoint relationship with Teams and what those things mean, and kind of not super wonky, but a little bit on how that interaction maybe works.
Sure. So high level, SharePoint is the backbone of everything that's Teams, Power Apps, almost Office in general at this point. Every team that you make inside of Teams or every channel is actually hosted on its own web page inside of your SharePoint. So what that means is everything that you do in Teams is also being done in SharePoint. It gives you a lot of security because of that, because it allows you to have versioning and backups that way, which is really, really nice feature.
Yep. I think that, when we think about that, and not, like I said, not to do a deep dive into the grass with that piece of it, but that security structure leverages, SharePoint leverages the way Active Directory is set up and permissions and those types of things. And I think that's important to have an understanding if you are in an environment, or if you are in a business that uses Teams or is wanting to use Teams, that underlying Active Directory structure and the way you have those things set up impacts, it ripples through all of these collaborative applications, because you do want to be able to control that access, especially when you have a cross-functional teams where somebody might be working on a project to help finance, and maybe you don't want somebody who's working on a project to help build an addition on a building to have access to those finance documents. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. So the way you have your Active Directory structure set up and the permissions that are associated with it ripples through SharePoint, but then also ripples through Teams. And I think that one of the things that Microsoft has done a good job of is marketing, number one. Number two is making that relatively invisible when you're interacting in the team space. But I think that it makes somebody who is playing a role similar to the one that Derek does technically important to an organization, because there's a little bit of forethought you need to have with a Teams implementation, because otherwise it can turn into kind of a spider web of permissions and trying to manage those things. So implementing Teams the planning in front of implementing Teams is important from a Active Directory and a SharePoint perspective. Does that make sense? Like I said, not to get too wonky, but it is important to think about those things as you're going into it, because I kind of talked about Microsoft doing a great job with marketing, which they have. The challenge is that it almost feels like add water, have Teams, and it's not quite that simple, because there's a lot of underpinnings that have to happen there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially as you start getting deeper into it and having wider scopes of projects and what different groups are supposed to be running and managing.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't mean to hijack your momentum there, but I just wanted to kind of give that perspective, because we do, we have a mix of operational and technical people on the call, and I just wanted to talk about that foundational piece.
Definitely. All right. Yeah, then this is more so the Power App side of it, if that's all right to move on to that part.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. So this is more so where we can start leveraging additional automation tasks. This is everything from making daily, yearly reports, breaking things into quarterly segments, and then having certain projects that start depending upon what's going on, whether that's for government reporting based on if you have different market for time of the year. A lot of these automations and stuff, kind of like within Excel, or if you get newsletters, can also be done within Teams and SharePoint in-house.
So oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so business automation is something that a lot of times that organizations don't necessarily contemplate. As humans, we get used to doing repetitive tasks, and we cut the tip off the roast because our mom cut the tip off the roast because her mom cut the tip off the roast. if you were to ask us why we're cutting the tip off the roast, we don't have any idea why we're doing it. Mom just told us to. And it can be that way with business process. So one of the nice things about Teams and the way Microsoft implements or has contemplated SharePoint is that they provide you with some very robust tools for doing business process automation.
Can you give us an example of something you've automated?
Yeah, do you want me to go down to that now, Keith, or?
Sure. I mean, let's talk. I mean, even something simple like the time off request that you had mentioned earlier. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Derek?
Yep. Yeah. So what this guy does is, I could actually probably bring this up into our side here. I don't know if I bring this over if you guys will see this or not. Let's see here, but essentially what happens when you click this button here, it'll generate a form that says what days do you want off, what's the reason for the time off, and then
I don't think we're seeing you have it on two screens. We're only seeing the schedule.
I tried to bring it over, but I wasn't sure if that would show up or not. So I was just kind of explaining it with free thought.
So once you approve their day off, does it then automatically go on to a company calendar?
Yep, exactly. And that's
even when we say company calendar, you can create an Outlook calendar, right, in today's world, and have those approved requests populate on an Outlook calendar, so you have the commonality of the same tool.
Yep. Yeah, it's also a good way to bug Keith because it sends out emails to him whenever someone asks for requests. So
well, that's also a good point. When we think about workflows, that employee turns in a request, and you don't need to go as an approver of requests. You don't need to go into a special environment and click a box or do this or do that. An email comes through. The way it's set up in the real world example is an email comes through, you click on something, it brings you to approve, disapprove, and you click approve, and then it adds it to a calendar automatically. That is so much easier than the old days where you had to even either write it on a manual calendar or even put it in an Excel spreadsheet someplace. But being able to create a matrix calendar that follows permissions and has all those things listed is a very powerful tool. And even being able to display that calendar within a SharePoint environment, because then it can present as a web page. So there's a lot of different options there just with that one tool. Derek, are you going to talk about some of the other tools that were created, or I have another example that I was kind of thinking about, but if you're going to talk about those in upcoming slides, I don't want to take your thunder.
No worries. I was probably going to talk about those during their example, because it's a little dry to just kind of watch that go on in the background.
Right.
As much as I find it interesting. But kind of going off the simplifying workflows, like we were just talking about with the calendar there, based on that approval or rejection, it'll also send out an email to the person who requested it, letting them know that, hey, your vacation wasn't accepted because of this reason. So you can actually put in a comment box instead of making up an entirely new email. So it's taking things that used to be 5 different steps and just combining that into 1 or 2 steps as much as possible.
I think that one of the other things, and I don't know if you're going to step through these bullets now, but I see the bottom one. When you talk about mobile apps, when we think about something like a vacation request form or those types of things, you're not tied to your workstation. So if you're a person who is on the road or dynamic, or you have things going on, or even in a wonderful work from home space, those requests can be done just with your mobile device. And it's kind of a different ballgame. I'm an old person, so I remember in past lives when people used to have manual paper forms and you had to be there to approve or disapprove those things, and you couldn't do it from a handheld device. But with this technology and the way, a couple of things that Derek has created, now you have access to it right from your phone. I can approve things from the movie theater now.
Yeah, one of the other things I was going to touch on with this one is kind of going off the reports being sent to your phone is, or the approve and denial is, we can also send, I have a couple apps that generate reports and will actually send notifications to users that they have specific jobs to do, depending upon the time of the year. And those requests or those forms that they need to fill out will actually be sent to their phone. So especially if they're walking out in the field, or if they're doing like a site survey on a house, or if they're doing reports in a farm, they don't need to jot down everything on a clipboard, bring it back to a terminal that has some internet issues, but they can just do everything right from their phone. So they never need to stop what they're working on or take that extra time to move those steps back to a proper work terminal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good point too, Derek, and that is that having the accessibility to do these things gives you an opportunity to collect data and then make decisions with it. So maybe there's some logic that happens behind the scenes, or maybe there's some kind of reporting that you want to do. You can aggregate the data that you're collecting from these various forms, and then you can make decisions about it, or you can use it for different elements in your business. If we want to see how many people have time off in March, we could do that. We could understand what's happening with those things, where in the past you would have to do a lot of manual things to have that happen, or now it's just pulling the data out of the tables. So
yep. And then this last slide is going to be the improvements. This kind of goes back to what I talked about with having that on-hand backups using SharePoint and integrating it inside of Teams. You're not leaving that environment. You're not sending out data outside of your organization. If you need someone to, let's say you're sending in emails for personal information because they need to sign up for either like a new hire, or they need to go to a shift in position and they're going to a different department.
Well, even that's a good example, Derek, of another workflow that is applicable in many different businesses and verticals, and that is the new hire process.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that, you have a lot of different pieces of information that traverses different departments. So if you're an organization that's on Teams, you can automate that process, and each individual organization can do their part and then pass it off
adaptation.
Yeah, we've had some, you know, like I said, not to, not to do any self horn honking here. Although, can you honk your own horn? I'm not sure. Anyway, we've had some good success with that type of an application where there's time sensitivity, and it escalates to a management person when there is a need to get those used term forms taken care of. And on the other end of it, with that, the other piece is auditing those forms, because in a lot of those security environments, you need to be able to have an audit path of, here's our current roster. Do any of these terms show up on the roster? This, using these automated tools is a great way to be able to track those events to make sure that the gazintas and the gazadas are the same.
Well, and I know too, 100 years ago when Paul lived in Green Bay, a position that he had, he said that he'd go by the HR director's office every day and say, anything I need to know?
Right. That's before he was banished from Green Bay? Before he was actually kicked out of the city?
All
I noticed he doesn't go to Wisconsin very much anymore. It must be one of those deals.
He's got to get new paperwork for that.
Yeah, I find I have to show my papers when I go back to Wisconsin too.
Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see this video.
Yeah,
at
I
this
can
point.
see it.
Awesome. This is a automated report system, essentially. So right now what it's doing is it's breaking down the past month's report, and it's actually generating a new table based on how much information is there. I'll try not to get too deep into it, and I thoroughly enjoy the programming aspects of it, but what this application does is it takes complaints that have happened over the past year, it rolls them all together into a monthly report, so that way, and then once the generation of the report is done, it'll send that out to the managers that are needing to see it based off of the complex they work on and what types of complaints they were part of and need to see. So
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing the whole thing there. It's just showing. Yeah, maybe we are.
yep.
I'm hoping this isn't a complaint card for NetVPro.
No, it takes a little while because I have to wait for
Okay.
system syncs. So that's why there's some dead air there. But
So is this happening live? Is this something that's being done right now, or is this a video?
this is a recording of the
Okay.
process.
Okay.
But this will happen at, let's say, 5 or 6 in the morning. Then when people start to get to the office, the actual emails will get sent out at 10 o'clock that day so that they can see that without being alerted at 5 in the morning that the report's ready for them. So we
And
have a lot of, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that we have a lot of flexibility with timing and processes, that we can start doing these things when it's low hours, so that nothing new is generated, or nothing weird kind of pops up and it doesn't take down from production time.
So this is an example of a report or a process that has multiple inputs, but also has multiple outputs, right? I mean, there's some intelligence behind who gets what information.
Yep.
So it's not just a single report being spewed forth onto the operational community. It's actually got some intelligence behind it, so the right person gets relevant data to them. They don't need to see everything for everybody. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because it's one thing to generate a report, but it's another thing to generate information that's relevant to the end user. And with these workflows, there's the ability to do that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I did hide multiple columns here of further detailed information for business privacy, but I got approval to kind of show the base template of what's going on, and kind of the more fun part of showing off the video versus the really in-depth logic aspects that I tend to go into.
I suppose this statement could be perceived as either positive or negative, depending on which end of the stick you're grabbing. But this type of reporting saves a tremendous amount of labor, because look at the calculations that are being done and think about the people it would take to pull that data from disparate locations in multiple states. So, this report is not only local, but it also is, well, you could say national, because there are multiple locations throughout many different states. One of the things that I was wondering before we turn it over a little bit is talk about third-party integration of third-party apps, because that was one of the things that I think that Microsoft has done in this space. They've created an incredible list of third-party apps that you can integrate into your workflows. Is that right, Derek?
Definitely. Anything from direct RSS feeds. So that's there's a couple sites that use direct news feeds from government offices for new food outbreaks, so like salmonella or anything of that nature. They have a direct tie-in from the government news feed into their SharePoint system, so that if anything pops up that's directly involves them, they'll get alerts all across the board so that they can immediately react to what's going on in the real world environment.
Right. So one of the things, just to clarify, one of the environments that NetVPro does work in is not only manufacturing, but food processing and manufacturing. And we can take that piece of information that maybe is received real time, and then we can make some decisions on it. We can even route that to the appropriate site. So in a food processing example, like I said, we have feeds coming in, and we can get those to the right people. So it's kind of a neat thing. I guess maybe talk a little bit too about some of the things we've done with inventory management even. And we actually, for one organization, created a whole help desk ticketing system right out of Teams itself.
Yep. So, and that can actually be used for multiple departments too, because let's say you have orders that are coming in, or you have sales reports that people need specifically. It'll actually queue in emails, and then based on who it's going to, who is received from, it'll actually make an entire ticket system for sales department, for marketing department, depending upon what you need. So it's pretty wide in that sense. As far as inventory goes, using the scanners or your cameras that are on your phone, you can actually scan barcodes. So what we did was, if you scan a barcode and take something out of inventory, it drops below a certain level. It'll not only reflect that level across the entire company so that they know how much stock they have of that certain part, but I actually put in a button where it says, do you want to refill this? You hit yes, and it'll actually open you up to a Amazon link to refill that order. So it's kind of going from just in your environment out to wherever you need to based on your requirements.
Or if you have customers that are in an EDI space, you can generate a file for EDI, put it out on a SFTP server, and automate that whole process. I think that when we start thinking about the time savings involved with it, it can be substantial. Are there any questions? We've been talking a lot. Are there any questions people have about anything really? Well, I mean, maybe not atmospheric questions. I'm not so good with meteorology, but anything else?
My question is this a product that you would help us create, or you're just telling us it's a great product and go ahead and take a stab at it on your own?
Good luck. No, it's a product that, or well, if you're within the Office 365 space, you already are licensed for the product in all likelihood. And if you have a need or an interest in creating any of these applications, we can help you with that. So, Derek actually does create a lot of these types of products himself. One of the things that we enjoy doing a lot is taking, creating something that exists out of something that doesn't exist. So if you have an idea, we're happy to sit down and talk to you about it and figure out how we can move forward with it. And if it's something we can do within that, really, it's a product that you're already licensed for if you're on Office 365.
And
I can just see the tracking of what to do in our quality system. you know,
Mhm.
to keep our accreditation current.
And that example that Derek showed real time was from a quality department.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have done a few, and we have multiple other workflows that we're doing within quality, because there is a lot of processes there. And yeah, so if there's ideas you have there, we can talk about it. And and like I said, just if anyone on a call wants to ask questions, give me a call and we can go through it. But it's an amazingly powerful tool. And like I said, when you start looking at the third-party integrations or third-party tools you can use, it's almost mind-boggling. I mean, everything from just simple project management tools to business intelligence and analysis stuff. It's very, very impressive the things you can do.
And well, twofold thing. The first is the best way for developing an application is working hand in hand with the company. So it always works best that up to kind of go over the steps that you kind of need just with you in person. That way we can actually work out exactly what you need versus a standard template.
Sure.
Because even if there's just a standard template out there, every business is so different. It's not going to fit everything that you're going to need. So it kind of allows us a greater degree of customization that way too.
And the other thing I'll say is that when we're doing this type of work, we try to make sure that we're standards based, because we do want to be your only partner. But if you need to go out and find support, or if you need to go out and get help with these apps, you can do that. I mean, we're the funnest ones to work with, obviously, but like I said, if you need to get help someplace else, you can.
Mhm.
Probably to our own detriment.
Well, one project at a time for us. We keep
Right.
tablets working, and we'll move on.
Right.
Right.
It sounds like you can almost get this tool to do anything. If someone can describe, I'd like to do this, it's probably something you can make this do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that somewhat
With
accurate?
enough
Pretty
blood,
close.
sweat, and tears against Microsoft. Yep.
Well, and between the capabilities that are built into the tool itself and third-party integrations, I would say that there's a lot you can do. There's a lot you can do. Even if you think about CRM tools and ERP tools and those types of things, there's a lot of integrations that you can use just to help you with those kind of process flowy types of tools. Even in marketing and sending emails and stuff like that, it's pretty amazing when you really do think about it.
Well, and some of the things we can do on, let's say the management side, I've made billboard applications that'll actually show what's in process, what's open, and what needs to be done still. So it's not just a straight, this is a workflow to get stuff done, but it's a
So-
display application that actually shows what's currently in process and being done by your team.
So we can actually take real-time inputs from production machine environments and let people know status in real time, displayed as a billboard across multiple sites, with emphasis put on what's happening in that site. So if you're an organization that has piece-driven inventory or piece-driven production needs, we can do that and we can track it. It is crazy when you think about it, but that was a great example to talk about, Derek, is that from a display board perspective, we can, in that particular implementation, we have production information going in and being fed to the display boards that are in the production floor, but that also has the RSS feed capabilities that's talking about what Derek had referenced earlier with issues, any kind of supply chain issues. So yeah, if we can get a hold of the information, we can do pretty much anything.
Kind of like you could use it for project management from start